Yeah, today's topic, cultural appropriation. I think we're gonna start off with. I guess I could just do a quick Wikipedia definition, just for those who don't know what that is. Um, according to Wiki, cultural appropriation at times is also phrased cultural misappropriation, is the adoption of an element or elements of one culture by members of another culture. So, yeah, I just want to start off with how you guys generally feel about appropriation and it's a good thing, bad thing. Yeah, just general feelings. Edel, you can start.
Um, I think cultural appropriation is kind of a touchy subject, obviously, but more so in the sense that um, I've kind of discovered, I've come to the conclusion that through other conversations from other people who are much smarter than I am, I've come to the conclusion that the actual concept and term of cultural appropriation should just have stayed within academia rather than become um, quite dominant in like normal speech, because it's definitely like a concept that is much deeper than like, hey, you stole my culture. But it's come to that because of common conversations and stuff. That's why like in the States it's a big thing, like cultural appropriation, when certain people that aren't black wear braids and stuff, and that discussion divulges into like the concepts of racism and stuff. Whereas from what I understand in academia and from what I've learned when I was still in school, like cultural appropriation is much more uh it's much deeper because it does play into um like dominant culture versus cultures that are obviously minorities, but they're also trying to be incorporated, or they're trying to assimilate them. That's where cultural appropriation becomes like a very touchy thing, because like the dominant culture is effectively stealing from a culture that they're basically like guarding over or whatever. So it like, to me, I think cultural appropriation should be looked at in a lens where it's, you gotta like really look into it more. But in the case of like our culture, when people um like try to look at it in a lens where they don't know much about our culture, that's where it becomes a little bit touchy. But we'll I guess I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that more, and we've already started talking
Yeah.
about that before we started live. But that's my general thoughts on cultural appropriation. The more we'll talk about it more, the more I'll also chime in on what my other thoughts on it. But that's the basis of it is. To me, I just think that cultural appropriation shouldn't just be thrown around here and there, like on Twitter. I disagree with
Mhm.
that. I think it doesn't help the actual discourse on culture when people use it to shut down people's ideas, or shut down a conversation and divulge like basically break down a conversation into something that's really stupid. So those are my thoughts on cultural appropriation, the actual like word of it. But yeah, more on that later.
I like that,
That's really
Mark.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a good um because like any all kinds of different words can be transformed and used in certain ways, and
Hmm.
that's why they say words have power. And like when you're pulling a word out of academia, you're correct. I think that it has to be, if you're going to use that word, you have to put it in a proper context.
Yeah, yeah,
And you can't just transform it into a weapon just to shut down somebody to say that you're right,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that's an important thing to consider. Uh, in terms of appropriation, like in our context,
Hmm.
I think that we're heading towards the idea of when people, for us, like when people kind of don't realize that they're borrowing from, even though we're part of the Filipino, we're part of that scape of Filipino culture.
Hmm.
uh, you when you don't recognize that, like you're like for example, like when I see people wearing like a Weesing or something like this over here, you
Hmm.
know, and they feel they want to connect because it makes them feel more. Sorry, that's my wife in the back laughing at a sitcom with it. So yeah, trying to be serious here. Anyways, what was I saying? Yeah,
The necklace.
We sing.
Oh yeah, so the Weesing, like I remember when I was in university, which was like, I don't know how many years ago now, like 20 something years ago, I guess, you know. Anyways, like I'll get sensitive about people wearing this stuff because, you know, they would wear it because they want to feel more Filipino, yeah.
Mm.
And I in hindsight, of course I get it now. But there was a lot of things that come with like being Igorot, like the discrimination that our elders and our ancestors had gone through over the years by our neighboring Filipinos, you know,
Hmm.
because of our history. And so there's a load of other things that come along with that. And so when people who were originally discriminated by, like, for example, like say lowlanders, then their ancestors automatically start wearing your stuff because it's mainstream and cool now,
Hmm.
then it kind of makes you go like,
What?
what? You know?
Really? Yeah.
so
Exactly.
so there are some things like I feel like I don't mind if people want to, you know, it's like wear our shirts or wear something that has an Igorot person on it. Like, you
Mm.
know, my brother-in-law's family, they're from the Masveri family, and people wear the Masveri shirts, and you know they want to represent their Filipino-ness and show their Filipino pride. But what I do appreciate is when people kind of look a little bit deeper into what that is and what that is for those people that you're wearing on your shirt,
Yeah.
or when somebody else who's not Igorot wears something that's made from our weave and stuff. It's like
Mm.
if they can really have a full appreciation of it, of where it comes from and the history behind that. And so those are the things that, you know, like I think that even when we borrow from like if you listen to hip hop, you know what I mean? If you listen to like African American music, you have to recognize that history of music, even rock and roll, like all that history comes from someplace, and
Yeah.
it comes from a certain people who've also been discriminated on. And if you can recognize that, appreciate that, and appreciate where that culture's coming from, then it. I'm not saying it's totally okay just to like start like acting like them or wearing their stuff, but at least you put some thought into that. You know, it's not just I'm wearing it because it's cool now. You know that kind of thing. Um, that was very intellectual what I just did too.
No, and
But
that's what
anyways,
I was looking for.
that's
Yeah.
yeah,
Actually.
that's kind of like where I'm at when I think about cultural appropriation and how I feel about it. I just think that there's nothing wrong with learning and appreciating other people's culture, and then maybe having it influence the way that your lifestyle is or the way that you want to live. Like, but just do your best to learn about it.
True.
Yeah,
Be
that
thoughtful.
exactly. That's a good point, and I like what you said, Edel, about taking it from the world of academia into mainstream. Like when I was looking up appropriation before this, yeah, I read that somewhere, and it's a really good point because yeah, it was in academia before, and then all of a sudden it's on Twitter and everything, and
Yeah.
everybody cares about their culture, and not even just their culture, but cool cultures, and it's just like yeah, I don't know.
It becomes
Uh,
sensitive when your stuff becomes mainstream and other people start using it, and well,
yeah,
it's
and
it's a whole other thing when they start using your stuff as a costume too.
it's true. It's true, exactly. Like
Yeah.
when I actually thought about cultural appropriation, I was wondering, so why does it actually make well? So personally, it gets me a little frustrated when I think about
Hmm.
it initially. But when you
Hmm.
really I don't know think about it more, sometimes with appropriation, you get a little bit more exposure, and with some of the things that we're trying to do, like this podcast and in our organizations, we are trying to increase that exposure of the whole world entirely
Hmm.
um, to our traditional ways and all that. So sometimes they say no, no. What do you say? No. What is it? No.
No.
No press is bad press.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
All.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like that, but at the same time, yeah, it gets frustrating when they are talking about your culture and things are incorrect or mislabeled or they're teaching about it
Hmm.
wrong. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's when I get frustrated. So yeah, I
I
think
mean, the way I
I.
see appropriation is that it's borrowing without asking, or and borrowing without
right,
not giving credit where you get it
exactly.
from. So if if you're wearing weasing or wearing certain weaves that look like indigenous, like Igorot stuff, but you're saying that, oh, this is what this is just me, it's all about me, or you don't give credit to what it is, and then you start embellishing it as your own kind of art, and people do stuff like this. uh
Yeah, yeah.
I think what's hurtful is when you don't cite your sources, when
Yeah.
you don't acknowledge the fact that it came from something. Look, we are in a globalized world. Look, COVID-19 is globalized like virus. Now everyone, it's all over the place, and we can't help it. But we've already been functioning that way for quite some time, no matter where we are, because we have a diaspora, and we've taken ourselves out into the world, and the world has come onto us. We are going to be influenced by the people and the cultures and the places that we are. It's just natural. We are going to take part of what that dominant culture is,
Hmm.
and it's going to be part of who we are. We're going to retain what this indigenous culture is. It's going to be part of who we are. But the people who know us too, just individually and also as a wider group, will come to embellish that as part of who they are, but give credit to where it comes from. And that's simply what I ask. And sometimes that's a hard thing because maybe people are just so used to taking, that they're not used to being able to honor where it comes from.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
what if
it's true.
that's part of the a part of the consciousness. But if you're gonna borrow without asking, well, maybe the whole thing is simply about respect, acknowledgement, and authenticity.